as the draft gets closer, and the Chicago Bulls have kind of already made their once in this draft kind of known, and some players are going to have to fight an uphill battle to get the Bulls to draft them. On today's episode, I want to talk about 3 players that are going to have to shine in private workouts with the Chicago Bulls if they want to change the Bulls' mind on them. We're going to talk about all that, plus the Bulls' methodology and why trading higher into the second round at least is probably going to be wanted or needed by the Bulls if they're going to want to get the best talent. We're going to talk about all that and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Derek Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. I want to start out talking about a few players, right? I've talked a lot over the last few days about the Bulls not being high on a few players. And, why, the Bulls look at those players as not fitting. On today's episode, I want to talk about 3 players and what they're going to have to do in private workouts to kind of get the Bulls to change their mind on them. 2 of the players are players that a lot of you Bulls fans do like, and that's Colin Murray-Boyles and Derik Queen. But then also a player that I do like that also seems like he may have slipped down the Chicago Bulls board, and that's Asa Newell as well, right? So I want to talk about those 3 players. To start off with Derik Queen, who a lot of people, and understandably so, right? They look at Derik Queen and they say, if he's there at 12, how do the Bulls realistically pass on this guy, right? Questions about his defense, of course, and especially what the Bulls need and what they're looking for at the center position of a switchable big who can either guard the rim or can be a rim runner. Derik Queen is none of those things, right? He's none of those things at all, not even close to it. But offensively, what does Derik Queen bring offensively that could help the Bulls? Now, he's a ball-dominant player. He operated with a 27% usage percentage, which is a star caliber player. Let's be clear there. If that was to transfer over to the NBA, that's talking about Nikola Jokic's level of being a ball-dominant player at the center position. Now, how much of that's going to translate at the NBA, right? This passing, he's a really solid passer, make no mistake about it. Even in the half court, though, there's going to be some questions about, his mid-range shot, those type of things. But I want to focus here on the positive, right? Derik Queen is sliding down a lot of draft boards. It's not just the Chicago Bulls, because there's definitely concerns about his athleticism grade, which was one of the worst in the draft combine in the last 5 years, which is there. So he's going to have to double down on what he does well. In private workouts, especially if he gets one with the Chicago Bulls, he's going to have to double down on showing his high basketball IQ, his motor, and how good of a passer he is. And if you can run, especially with the Bulls having players that like to cut and things like that, can you eventually run some of your offense through Derik Queen, right? That's what he's going to have to show when it comes down to it. He has amazing feel in the paint, and we know that he is a presence in the paint that, despite his size, I do think is still going to be able to score at the NBA level, right? What he does inside the three-point line, he understands everything. Scoring himself, putting the ball on the floor, getting the ball to his teammates, right? He does all of that, right? And the one thing, the thing that he just doesn't do is what the Bulls need and want a center to be great at, and that's be a great rim protector. He has 20% shot from shooting from three-point, so he doesn't stretch the floor either, right? So those combination of those 2 things are working on, it's going to hold him back. So he's going to have to focus on the fact that if this Bulls team does want to play with pace, he's a big that can definitely do that. He can playing in pace if he does that. He can play the trailer, that type of thing. But, even Nikola Vucevic, right, who, shout out to my boy Luke from the Discord, who likes to point out the fact that, well, Vooch worked in the Bulls offense. Yeah, part of the reason why Vooch did work in the Bulls offense is because of his ability to, as the trailer, to still hit a decent three-point shot, even though we don't want Vooch to take a whole lot of threes, right? That he has a lot to show even in that regard if he's going to end up being the trailer. But to highlight his playmaking ability, that's going to have to be the thing. Motor, playmaking ability, those are going to have to be things that he really does double down on if he gets a one-on-one meeting with the Bulls. And we don't even know if he's going to get that. I want to be clear. It's looking more and more likely that either the Bulls are playing it really close to the vest and maybe they like Derik Queen more than other teams realize, or the Bulls don't like Derik Queen at all in that draft. And that's the concerning part. If that ends up being the case, what does that then look like, right? Who's your evaluation? Because I tell you what, when you talk about best player available, it's hard to not say that Derik Queen may be that guy as far as when you're basing it off college production. Now, if you're trying to, what the Bulls are also looking at is the fit in the scheme and on this team. And I know some Bulls fans have they say you don't draft for fit because what if you're, and it's a legitimate question, what if something happens to where the makeup of your team drastically changes? What if you don't have Kobe next year, right? What if those type of things happen? And so those are definitely fair questions, I think, when it comes all down to it. But you still got to ask yourself, like, if Pat, how much would you potentially regret passing on Derik Queen if you do? How much is he going to make you pay? And that's what the Bulls have to ask themselves in this type of thing. But like I said, they're not if the Bulls were the only ones that were down on Derik Queen, I would understand it, a little bit more, but they're not. They're not the only ones that have this question, but he finishes around the rim. He's a really solid rebounder per minute, right? 18% rebound percentage, which is really, really good. Still the 1.1 blocks, the 1 steal per game. Like, he's still active, even though he's not a great one-on-one defender. But Derik Queen is really, really going to have to change some minds in Chicago, it seems like. The next guy is Colin Murray-Boyles. And, this guy has this. Now, I'm not a fan of Colin Murray-Boyles at all, not at this draft position. I'm just not. Now, if you were picking lower, great, right? And it seems like a lot of people are starting to feel that way about CMB2. I told you guys, my preferred mock draft is NBADraft.net. They have him falling to the beginning of the second round. Now, I've said it before. I still think that is way, 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 way too low on Colin Murray-Boyles. I think his upside defensively just puts you in a position where it's going to be, he has the chance to be a game changer defensively. And there's not that many people. I think we forget that sometimes. There's not that many people who really you can look at and say, hey, even if their offense don't work out, they can be a game changer in this way. He is one of those guys, right? And so his floor defensively is still so high that, like, that's one of the things that keeps him from being somebody that you look at and like, hey, he may not make the NBA. No, I think his defense alone is going to make sure that he's an NBA player for a long time. But his size, 6'6", measure that, or he's gonna be 6'7" with shoes on. The fact that he wasn't great in the athletic testing, not terrible either, right? It's a combination of lack of size, the wingspan questions, right, when it comes down to that as well. And the fact that he doesn't project to be a 3. I think a lot of people kind of look at him and they're like, well, yeah, he can be your 3, he can be your defender. He is not going to be a 3 at the next level. I'm sorry. He's either going to be a 4 or he's going to be a 5. And it's looking a lot like he's going to be a 5 right now. One of the things, 26.5% from three-point range, and that's a huge concern for him. In the combine drills, he did shoot 48% from the corner. If you can shoot that corner 3 at that rate, that's pretty damn good, right? He's going to have to sell. Again, we're focused on what they're going to have to do to change the Bulls' mind on them. He's going to have to show that lockdown defense and rebounding. If you can do those two things, you can be a lockdown defender and a rebounder. Like, those two things are going to get you. His assists, 2.4 assists, 2.4 turnovers. That's not so. Even with him being, having some passing responsibilities, because much like with Derik Queen, he was a guy that had the ball in his hands a lot. And that's not going to happen in the NBA, right? The way that he scored in college is not going to be the way that he's going to score in the NBA, if he even does that. But again, the defense, that's the thing that you're going to have to focus on. And I do think, like, even in that, with his ability to play active, get rebounds, put bodies on people, even on the offensive side, when he gets rebounds, that's going to be there something, right? The trajectory of Derik Queen, whether it's, however you view it, if it's more Grant Williams or more Draymond Green, that's a concern there. There's going to be concern for a lot of people when it all comes down to that. So we'll see. And I think the team that he goes to, the fit there and the role that they have for him, much like Draymond, is going to be a huge, huge piece to this puzzle for Colin Murray-Boyles. But if the Bulls are not high on him. If he gets a private workout with the Bulls, he's going to have to really show that the strengths that he has there, he's going to have to really double down on that. And another guy, the last guy we're going to talk about in this segment is Asa Newell. Now, this is a guy that I do love in this draft. I've loved him. I think his defensive mentalities is, again, the switchability that he has, the rim protecting ability that he has, all those things. I like this kid a lot. 61% true shooting percentage. He's going to thrive off putbacks in the NBA. There's some questions about the wingspan, though. Big questions about that wingspan. Measure that basically 6'9", right, which is fine. But that's six. When you're 6'9", you like to have a over 7 foot wingspan to be effective at the NBA level. Maybe Asa Newell can buck those trends. I think also he's going to have to flash, unlike the other guys, he's going to have to flash his upside offensively because Asa Newell is growing as a three-point shooter. His three-point shooting in the combine was actually pretty solid. So if he can develop that part of his game, I think that's going to be something that really stands out for him. He's starting to be mocked back into the lottery. Like I said, there was a little bit of time there where he was mocked outside the lottery, and that's kind of why he fell out of grace there. But now people are starting to have him going right back up there as well. Still not quite where he was in pre-draft conversation, but still right outside that lottery is where a lot of people have him at. And this is a player that I think if he gets a private workout with the Bulls, which there may be in some conversation that he will work out with the Bulls eventually privately, but he's a guy that his defense, that dog mentality that he has. A lot of people say there's a little Joakim Noah and Colin Murray-Boyles, and if that's there for sure, with a threat to actually maybe go out and shoot the three a little bit more, that's something that's there, right? 30% three-point shooter, just under 30%. So if you can work on those mechanics some and to get him to be a player that doesn't really, three-point shooting is a huge part of his game, but it is something that he can go to, I think that's there. But everything else, the rim running, the finishing around the rim, especially in the way that the Bulls like to play with pace, the lob threat, all that's there. If he can show that and that mentality, I think he can turn the Bulls' minds on him a little bit. So let me know what you guys think of those three players down below. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about the second round, right? The Bulls do have a second round pick, which presents an interesting choice for the Bulls, right? Heading into this draft, there were a lot of prospects going into the second round that had a lot of upside. But due to the NIL, right, and due to other things, a lot of those players that would have been really good quality picks in the second round, later in the second round, a lot of those have gone back to college, right? Jonathan Giovanni said that it's a shallow second round, meaning that there's still some quality there. It's just not going to be as deep into the second round as maybe people were initially thinking, right? So the Bulls, if they identify a talent that they like in the second round, they may have to trade up in the second round to get him, right? So there's been said that probably around pick 35, which is only 5 picks into the second round, things take a drastic fall off, right? So when you look at some of the players in the second round, so it's a lot that we've already covered. Noah Penda, I think, is a good one there. Adu Thero, he's another one there that I really like. Ryan Kalkbrenner could eventually go into the end of the first round. Johnny Broome, right? These are all guys that we've covered here that all make a lot of sense for the Bulls in different ways to round out that bench. Some are upside picks, those type of things. And so the Bulls trading higher into the second round isn't something that we haven't seen them do before. For example, you look at Julian Phillips, we didn't even have a pick in the second round. We traded 2 second-round picks to move up, future second-round picks to move up to go out there and get him. So if the Bulls see and identify another talent that they think is worth bringing in, like I said, Johnny Broome, I like him as the high floor guy, especially like a bench big, a tough guy. Like I said, just a tough motherfucker. Sometimes you just need those guys on your team. Adu Thero has tons of upside in this draft for sure. Ryan Kalkbrenner somewhere between really good upside and a high floor as well, right? And Noah Penda is really all upside, but I really like that kid as well. I want to introduce another one. That's Sion James. Now, the reason why here is that I have him here is that he was on that Duke team. He played with Cooper Flagg, Knuppel, Kaman Malawak, and Tyrese Proctor. Tyrese Proctor, another player that I like to go in the second round potentially. But you have Sion James there. And the thing about him is that he was the best on-ball defender in Duke last season as a whole. And I think that is something you really have to look tough at, is that on-ball defense. That is what he would bring in. He measured at 6'4", right, barely, so that puts him at about 6'5", but he's one of the most well-built players in this draft at 218 pounds, all muscle, 6'6.5" wingspan, right, which is something that I think that a defensive first wing, I get it, you want more 6'7", 6'8" wingspan, but I think that's enough for him at the NBA level. And then you look at what else he did. He's one of the fastest players in this draft. He ran a 3/4 court sprint at 2.97 seconds, right? 32-inch standing vertical, 39 0.5 inches on the max vertical, which was the fourth best among all players at the draft combine. This is a guy that is effective. Then you look at the small sample size when he did have to start last year. He played really well in that time, right? 70% on catch and shoot threes, which is something we really don't have on this team. No, Kobe White is not a catch and shoot player. Kevin Huerter has shown that a little bit of that over his career. He wasn't really that for the Chicago Bulls, but we didn't have the time to fully work in his skill set. But I think that's another thing. So typical 3-and-D player, and I think the upside on that is really high for him when you look at who he played with. He grew completely as a shooter as well. You look at his freshman year as a 28% three-point shooter with Tulane, 41.3% three-point shooter with Duke. This guy can shoot it. 51% from the field as well, 81% from the free throw line. You talk about a defensive-minded but 3-and-D player in the modern NBA that can come off your bench as a wing. I like Sion James a lot here in the second round for the Bulls, and I hope that he's somebody that they definitely take a hard look at in the second round for this team. But you guys can let me know how you feel on that down below. Now, in tomorrow's episode, we're going to break down into why the Bulls' salary cap is kind of pointing to the direction that they may be keeping all their free agents. But before we get into that, Mondays I use as overflow. We had a couple of voicemails we didn't get into over the weekend. We're going to get into those now. This one's from Shay.
What's up, Hayes? It's Shay. Look, man, I know, first of all, let me address 3 things. Look, I think it's stupid if we trade down in this draft just to get some unproven talent that only averages about 7.5 points a game, especially when we already went off of speculation with Patrick Williams. And I know a lot of people don't get Patrick Williams' mindset all at all, but I think it's stupid. But one, we need an actual big man. We need an actual big man. I think we should be looking for that in the first round and try to figure out the other stuff in due time. Secondly, look, I don't know about you, but AK, it seems to me like he's making his free agent moves much early, and I don't think he should necessarily depend on this year. I don't think he should necessarily depend on a whole bunch of rookies.
Here's the thing that I will say, Shay. It's going to be interesting, right? Because I get what you're saying in that for sure, is that trading back is a concern. Now, I do think some of the players that the Bulls were trading back to get are things that now could make a little bit of sense or no longer make sense for the Bulls. Though some of those players are starting to move up for sure, right? So I think that's something that you got to look at. A lot of those players that were worth trading down for are now no longer, going to go that low because of what's happening in the draft, things like that. But I think if you do trade back, it's not to get a player that averaged 7.5 points. It's because you can get a Thomas Sorber by trading back, right? That was the kind of talk there. So we'll see what happens. Now, I still think the most likely scenario is that the Bulls stay packed there at number 12 and they just draft their prospect. I think if they're going to trade, move up and down in the draft, that's probably going to be in the second round. Can they move from the second round into the end of the first, or can they move higher up in the second round? That's where I'm starting to think the highest probability is there. At least that's what I think. But let me know what you guys think on that down below. All right, let's get into the last one for today. This one's from Reggie.
Hey, this is Reginald Colin. Like I said earlier, I really like the idea of the Bulls heading down. And if we can get off, not because of the poor quality of players at 12, but because the draft is deep enough that you can get away from it. And yeah, there's a chance that the Bulls will miss out on one of their key players that they want, like a Silver. But like I said earlier, the draft is deep enough. And the idea of trading players to get more of our salary cap back so we can make a bigger impact in free agency this year, I'm not mad at that idea. Like trading Huerter to Brooklyn for the number 36 pick, or trading down to Orlando and giving them Javon Carter without taking any salary back. I wouldn't have said those 2 things. Also, what do you think about trading Roos to a team like the Clippers? Like, I used to think maybe the Bulls could trade Boots to Dallas, but, I don't see them. They keep talking about wanting defense, and we both know that's not Boots. So maybe trade Lonzo to Dallas for Najee Marshall, and then use the trade exception to get Daniel Gafford. I know I just saw CHGO and one of the commentators talking about getting Jared Jackson, but it's going to cost too much. But, with that being said, the problem becomes shooting. You need 2 or 3 good quality 3-point shooters, not just in the starting lineup, but on the bench as well. But with those moves, would you consider dropping someone like a Coward at 15, or maybe trading down to 17, get the 31st pick, then draft Coward, and with the 31st pick get Broom? What's your opinion? Thanks.
Reggie on the complete opposite end, right? You like the idea of the Bulls trading down. I think it's this. You don't typically see trade downs like in the NFL. I think a lot of people who talk about the Bulls trading down talk about it as, well, let's trade down and get a couple of more assets. That's not really how it always works in the NBA. Yeah, you have some of that, but if you look at typical trade down scenarios in the NBA, it's either straight up or you're getting future stuff that's far out, but either not promising. Like a lot of times you'll see that fake pick that is like, yeah, you get this heavily protected first round pick that has barely no chance of conveying, right? So those are the type of things that you typically see in trading down in the NBA. It's not like the NFL. So I think it just comes down to if you think you can get your guy low. And that's watching the board, being really tuned in with what other teams could potentially do, and that's going to make that decision. I like how these two were on opposite sides of this argument, but let me know, you guys that are watching, that are listening. Do you think that the Bulls should trade down? If so, if their target's there, or do you think they should stand pat? Let me know that down below. But that's my time for today. Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like we like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.